Hi, welcome to the TC. My name's David, and today we're going to be taking a look at the iPhone 6s in 2022, now that Apple's finally discontinued support for the iPhone 6s. So, a 2015 flagship phone, like the iPhone 6s, is now, let's say, around 7 or 8 years old. So it's not really unexpected that Apple would have discontinued support for the iPhone 6s. If anything, it was actually kind of expected the last year or even the year before that. So seeing that Apple has discontinued support for the 6s with the upcoming iOS 16, it's not really surprising to see that the iPhone 6s is being left behind on iOS 15. What was more surprising to me was actually that the iPhone 7 was also being left behind on iOS 15. Now, if you really look at the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 6s, not much is very different, and really the major difference between the iPhone 6s and the iPhone 7 is that the iPhone 7 has the A10. Now, the A10 is basically a 2-core processor, but it actually has 4 cores. However, it can only use 2 at either time. So if you need something more demanding, it will use the 2 performance cores, but if you need to save some power, it will use the 2 low efficiency cores. So that's the difference, really. They both have 2 gigabytes of RAM, unless you had the plus size iPhone 7, and that one had 3 because it needed it for portrait mode. But other than that, there's not a really huge power difference between them. So I guess I can kind of see why Apple would have discontinued support for the iPhone 7 series. But with the iPhone 6s, yeah, that's totally expected. Now, even though the iPhone 6s is discontinued with its support, it doesn't mean that Apple is officially actually discontinuing support altogether for the iPhone 6s. You can really just expect some security updates for the iPhone 6s and the iPhone 7, but other than that, there's not going to be any new features coming to the iPhone 6s. Now, iOS 15 is actually not a terrible OS for the iPhone 6s to be left on. I've been using it, and honestly, it runs pretty well. The major thing I would say is that the iPhone 6s does get really hot because it is an older phone, so all the newer apps and different tasks it needs to do are more demanding for the iPhone 6s. But other than that, it can run them. So honestly, the iPhone 6s has aged really well compared to something like the iPhone 4S that was stuck on iOS 9? Yeah, that was a terrible nightmare. But the iPhone 6s can handle iOS 15 just well. One of my biggest gripes though with the iPhone 6s is actually its battery life. Now this 6s series has one of the smallest batteries in the iPhones, so that translates to basically pretty abysmal battery life, especially if you have an iPhone 6s that hasn't had its battery replaced in a long time or ever. Now my iPhone 6s had its battery replaced around the 2017. You remember that little scandal Apple had with the throttling the batteries? Well, this iPhone had the battery replaced around that time, and right now my battery capacity is at 85% on the battery health. So that's kind of giving you a gauge as to where the iPhone 6s is in terms of battery life, and now that's also something to consider about your iPhone 6s, or if you're going to be giving an iPhone 6s to someone, or if you're buying one, check the battery health. Because if it's starting to get into like the 80s, then you really have to worry about how long the phone is going to last. Now, it was pretty dramatic for me because the iPhone 6s I have here is a 6s Plus. And I can tell you definitely that even at 85% maximum battery health, this iPhone cannot last a day. You're lucky to get it to last around like 6 hours, honestly, especially if you start using it. It has pretty great standby time, but if you're actually using it, that's when you start to see the battery start to go down really quick. So that's something to really consider. You might have to go around and, use the battery case while you're using your 6S. So it's kind of unfortunate, but that's just the reality of having older batteries. Now, something really awesome about the 6S that really no other iPhone can really compare to is that it does have a headphone jack. Now, this is probably one of the more controversial things, but I think that having the headphone jack is honestly a really awesome thing to have on a smartphone, especially if you want to use it for something like music or playing music in your car if you don't have Bluetooth or CarPlay. So, having that headphone jack is really nice. You don't have to carry around a dongle. So this can double up as basically like your iPod if you didn't want to bring your phone. It's lighter than most of the newer iPhones, so that's really a big benefit to it. And you got the headphone jack, so plug in whatever headphones you want. Now, I wouldn't really go out of my way to say, oh yeah, go purchase an iPhone 6s right now. Because honestly, yeah, it's an old phone and not having support really sucks. But if you're trying to give this to like someone like your kid or an older family member, honestly, the 6s is more than capable of handling that. If you get a battery replacement, I think the battery replacements for the 6s are substantially easier to do than the iPhone 7, because the iPhone 6s, although it does have some of the water gaskets, you don't necessarily have to put them back in, since this isn't actually rated to be water resistant like the iPhone 7. But honestly, I mean, if you really wanted to, it's like $2 for some gaskets. But the battery replacement for the iPhone 6s is a lot easier than something like the iPhone 7. So, it could be a little project for you to do too. So I honestly think that this would actually be a really great device for a kid, because it's not new. It's something that you can basically kind of check around. The iPhone 6s is pretty durable. It does have the newer series aluminum that replaced the iPhone 6s that would honestly just kind of bend because people would put them in a back pocket or like, so you remember the bend test? Yeah, not a good time. But this has this series 7000 aluminum, so it's really durable in that regard. I mean, this phone has taken a couple drops, and honestly, all it's done is kind of just scratched it. So if you look here, try to get it to focus. Yeah, see? That's really all it's done. Other than that, though, yeah, I mean, this phone can take a beating. And I'm pretty sure the screen replacements for this iPhone are really easy too, because you can actually take out the Touch ID button. Something that you can't do with the iPhone 7. The iPhone 7 has that newer capacitive, like, haptic touch home button, but this has the physical home button, so that's something to consider as well. So really, that's my thoughts on the iPhone 6s. Yeah, I mean, it's an old phone, and not having that support kind of sucks going into the future of this iPhone 6s, but you can still use an iPhone 6s today. It's not going to be the greatest at battery life or performance, but it still runs basically any app that you want to use. And you can always just use a charger or get a battery replacement. Honestly, I think it's one of the best iPhones ever made, just because you have the headphone jack and you have easily replaceable parts like the screen and the battery. So yeah, that's the iPhone 6s in 2022. Let me know if you guys have an iPhone 6s. Do you still use it today? Are you giving it to someone else? Or are you looking to buy one? I want to know. So put that down in the comments down below. And if you liked the video, please leave a like down below and subscribe while you're at it. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.